Hi there, I'm Scott Lowe with ActualTech Media. Thank you for joining us for this Roadcast video. I'm here today at Maxta with David Friedlander, who is the Director of Product Marketing. David, thank you for having us here today.
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Scott.
So we're going to talk about some pretty cool stuff. We're going to talk about hardware versus software. And this is a debate that's been going on. It's Mac versus PC. It's the Jets versus the Rams. I don't follow sports, so I don't know if those are two team people like or not. But let's talk about what it means in the world of hardware and software. And this is something people really have to think about. And sometimes the answers may not be as clear as you think. Tell us what your thoughts are on the role in hyperconverged infrastructure of buying hardware that's bundled with software or buying software alone.
Sure. So there's a by now old adage that software is eating the world. It feels it's probably 5 years ago that we started hearing about that. But what's happened with hyperconvergence is it's really helped take out the complexity of traditional storage. And that's what people turn to it for. But there is a question today of whether you deploy a hardware approach or a software approach. Software meaning essentially you buy the software and then roll your own hardware around it. But it's still hyperconverged. So there are definite trade-offs in what you do. One of the big things that we see is that with hardware, what happens is you will get into a situation where down the road, and this is now starting to happen since hyperconvergence has been around for 4 or 5 years in earnest, is you come to a refresh point with that hardware. Mm-hmm. And what happens if you've essentially purchased those together is you go to refresh, you're buying hardware and software together again. So
you're paying all over again.
Yes, you're paying for it all over again. It's a little bit of the same thing that happens with a storage appliance or with a storage array. Is you buy it and essentially you're paying for the software again, and you need to do a lift and shift of all your data. Certainly easier with hyperconvergence, but that same issue exists. So the question then becomes, do you want to pay for that software all over again? There are certain environments and greenfield environments where that can make sense. But with software, you don't have that issue. The software is separate from the hardware. You can refresh the hardware at your own pace. So we think of that as really a refresh tax that can hit you down the road with that hardware.
And there's significant cost implications to this decision. I mean, when you're thinking about buying a bundled hardware appliance, you're going to pay the markup on the hardware and the software. Basically, with a software-only model, you're going to be able to go to your favorite server vendor, and you're going to be able to buy whatever servers you want to buy at the typical discount you normally buy them at. And you can refresh one, you can refresh 10, and it also means that it has implications for upgrading mid-cycle. That happens a lot. People say, I've run out of space, I need to add more disks to this node, or more RAM to this node, or more CPU to this node. What does the software-only approach allow you to do that you may not be able to do with an appliance?
Yeah, so two things. One, you commented on the just the notion that you can use any hardware you want. That generally is true, and you do want to obviously use enterprise-grade hardware. Make sure you're on the whatever HCL for whatever vendor it is. So don't go to Fry's and buy a white box, obviously, right? And people sometimes think that that's we can just throw whatever SSD in and it'll work. But generally speaking, be it your Lenovo customer, your HP, you're switching from one to another using Supermicro, or even just general white box vendors that may provide to say MSPs or other data centers. The other thing from a software-only approach is that you can add or swap out drives midstream within a cluster. If it's architected appropriately, you can mix and match models. You could have a Dell 720 and throw in some 730s or some HPs into the mix in the cluster. And you never have a conflict with that.
And I talked to Arjun Narang with Maxta earlier today. And one of the things he mentioned was the route resiliency. So you can basically, as a user, pull a drive, put a new one in, and it's going to rebuild. I mean, I don't have to worry about going to the vendor to help me with that. Because it's already built in to be able to do these sorts of things.
Exactly. So that's something you can do in flight. You can generally Maxta is certainly architected around that principle of if you need to replace a drive or just upgrade a drive, go from a 1 to 2 terabyte, you can do that swap while the system is running, and it will do the rebuild for you.
Do you have customers that are doing these mid-cycle upgrades on hardware on their own?
Yes, we definitely do. Many of them come in wanting to use the hardware they have. We have a customer that I just spoke with this morning that's actually it's Air Force Base, and they have some Dell 720s, and they're going to 730s. So they'll be doing that mid-cycle. Right now they have some of them in the same cluster, and so they'll be moving those to 730s over time, and even in some of the older hardware, upgrading the drives along the way if they want to keep those for a bit longer.
And what are some of the other reasons beyond cost that people are looking to do this? Is there a technical reason people want to go software versus hardware as well? And I guess the choice of hardware is, choosing the vendor is really one of the key technical reasons, right?
Yeah, so you certainly want to be able to choose your hardware vendor. So that's one thing that drives it, is the choice of vendor. They may have existing hardware. That's really more of a cost argument. They don't want the upgrade tax of paying 3 or 4 times more for the drives or the memory than they really need to. But then there's also, I think, from a technical standpoint, what platforms do I want to have access to down the road? And this goes beyond just hardware versus software in some cases, but the thing that a lot of customers we work with want is they want the flexibility of both for hardware and for the hypervisor down the road.
Right.
So they may be VMware today, and they may continue with VMware, but want to add KVM into the mix and run on different platforms. And not everybody offers that opportunity, so that's one of the other considerations, I think, with both hardware versus software, but just the overall platform.
Excellent. David, thank you very much for this conversation.
Thank you, Scott. Yeah.
Appreciate it. And thank you for watching our video today.